The Rage Phase, a term used to describe a phase in a spell card that is only accessible by timing down a spell well beyond its average finish time. Very few bosses even have such a phase, and they tend to just be the pattern's expected final phase with an additional aspect or so to them, such as an increase in bullet speed or density. Here's an example, demonstrated by the ever-youthful Yukari's penultimate spell card. The spell card has damage-based phases, meaning that as you continue to do damage, Yukari adds more elements to the spell, with the last addition being some chunky blue bullets. As you can see in the footage, I finished with just under a minute left on the timer. Now for the Rage Phase, when the timer hits 30 seconds, Yukari will instantly go into the final phase with an additional set of butterfly bullets that are aimed at you. Quite a huge jump in difficulty from a single addition. And Yukari isn't the only boss who has one of these. That's why today, I wanted to look at the various Rage Phases in Touhou games, and see what they're like, and how they differ from the usual final damage phases. I'll also be looking at some patterns that aren't necessarily Rage Phases, but have some silly aspects to them caused by lack of damage, or timing them down. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with everyone's favorite Sister of Scarlet. Flandre Scarlet's final spell card, Ripples of 495 Years, often shortened to just QED, is the first instance in Windows Touhou to feature a Rage Phase. Here's how it works normally. Flandre fires out a wave of bullets from a general area around her, and any bullet that touches the walls or ceiling will bounce off of it once. As you damage her, the speed of the bullets and frequency of the waves increases, but the bouncing properties remain the same. The Rage Phase starts the same as Yukari's. In fact, many of them start at the 30-second mark, so going forward, assume this to be the case, unless I say otherwise. Anyways, this one simply ups the speed and wave frequency beyond that of the final damage phase. Well, I say simply, but it's anything but. That was pretty quick, so let me pad the time by addressing a few things regarding these phases and the rest of the video. First, I'm using TH-Prac for invincibility, so it doesn't disrupt the visuals of the pattern. Second, some of the footage you'll see here will be the phases with well beyond 30 seconds, or with the timer not moving at all. This is also due to TH-Prac allowing me to prevent the timer from going down, or starting a pattern out the gate with the Rage Phase. I'm sure you've thought about how unlikely anyone is going to encounter one of these phases in normal gameplay by now. Not to mention waiting for over a minute should you want to attempt them would be incredibly tedious, if not impossible to clear from full health anyway. Thanks to TH-Prac, you can easily do attempts at these goofy phases, and they're considered a fun challenge to try and capture a full Rage Phase pattern. Well, maybe fun isn't the right word, but a challenge nonetheless. I am not good enough at these games to make any headway in these challenges, so any good gameplay you see here is borrowed footage from future LOLK LNNer, Crazy for Pokemon, / Valley Van Van. Most of the footage here used is available on their channel linked in the description, so feel free to check it out after the video. Next up is Chen's EX spell card, Red Oni, Blue Oni. This isn't actually a Rage Phase, but it is a spell card that gets pretty ridiculous bullet frequency wise when timed down. I want to include spells like this because they make me wonder what exactly Zun was thinking when he designed it. Was it intended to slap players who wanted to time things down? Or was it something he didn't bother to adjust thinking no one would really bother with it? I know the Rage Phase's existence at all is a good argument towards the former, but not every spell card is notorious for difficult timeout attempts, so it really makes you think. Next would be Yukari Yakumo's penultimate spell, Border of Life and Death, which is the pattern I used as an example at the start. Only thing I can add to this is I can only find a record of a single person actually capturing this Rage Phase at all, the person in question being Salk, a legendary Touhou player who has completed every Windows era Touhou game on the highest difficulty without getting hit or bombing at all, with every shot type in the games. Side note, doing this in a game is what's referred to as an LNN, meaning Lunatic, the difficulty, no miss, not getting hit, and no bomb. Self-explanatory. There's a bit more nuance to the individual games, so this is just a rough generalization, in case you've heard the term before and didn't know what it meant. Next up is Kochiya Snai's Moses Miracle. This isn't a Rage Phase, just a pattern that gets real thick with bullets over time. The bullet trails at the start are 8 bullets long, and by the end of it, each trail is 18 bullets long. It becomes a constant battle of tight squeezing and restreaming, while praying for your own miracle to come about. Fortunately, the sides of the pattern stay consistent throughout it, though could you imagine if the sea got thinner as well? I think it would fit the spell card, but I can't imagine how much worse the whole thing would end up as a result. Next up is Moriya Suako's final spell, Mishaguji-sama. This pattern is only these waves of crisscrossing bullets, and as you damage it, the frequency that Suako fires increases. The Rage Phase here starts after 20 seconds, and expectedly, Suako's rate of fire increases beyond the norm. I wish there was more to say about this one. As compared to Flan and Yukari, it's pretty tame. Honestly, the spell as a whole is not very exciting for a final extra spell card, but that's just me. The only thing I can really add is that the timer for this spell is well over 2 minutes long, which is just not worth sitting through for 20 seconds of what is essentially just super demarcation. Next up is Ryuji Utsuo's final spell, Subterranean Sun. The spell card is pretty neat. Oku pulls bullets towards her, as well as the player. And as you damage her, the sun gets bigger, the suction gets stronger, and she fires bullets. The rage phase for this one increases the size of the sun, and the strength of the suck, getting it to the point where unfocused movement becomes vital to survival. But what's interesting is that the red bullets she pulls in alongside you change their formation to allow the player more room to move. Weirdly, starting the spell on this phase through TH Prac doesn't give her a full health bar, which makes this rage phase not nearly as challenging to capture as the others. Next up is Minamitsu Murasa's Sinking Vortex. Murasa spawns a pattern of bullets that stretches pretty far off screen, and these bullets accelerate as they fall. What's noteworthy about this one is that Zun either forgot, or didn't bother, to make a speed cap for them, meaning the bullets continuously get faster as time goes on. Thanks to the spell card timer, this doesn't really matter, but with TH Prac, I can stop the timer, and we can see just how fast it can get. Here's how the pattern looks after a minute has passed. Now, here's 5 minutes. Next is 10 minutes. And I'll wrap up the demonstration with 30 minutes past. As you can see, the pattern gradually reaches an impossible level of speed to manage. It eventually becomes so fast that the bullets can only be on screen for a handful of frames, which actually became easier to dodge. I don't know how much else will change when you run it longer, but the last 15 minutes or so looked pretty identical. So either it did cap, or the increase is just unnoticeable anymore. Side note, I noticed when doing the pattern that it looked like it bled into the third non despite the clear. So I shot down the 30-minute stall, and sure enough, those ridiculously fast bullets were still raining down for a bit. Does this mean the bullets for the spell card spawn so far off screen that it just takes a while for them to clear? Or are they straight up out of range of the shoot down clear AoE? Well, let me know if you know. Seriously. Next up is Hijiri Byakuren's Devil Recitation. A rather interesting spell to have a rage phase, as it isn't a final or even second last spell card. However, as it's based on Shinki's penultimate pattern from Mystic Square Stage 6, it technically ends up fitting the bill. The spell doesn't hit its rage phase until 15 seconds left. However, it automatically goes into its final damage phase at 25 seconds. I dodged the entire pattern up to that point without moving. The rage phase only adds an additional layer of fast red bullets shot out like a ring. But as I'm sure you're aware by now, you don't need much to make something quite a degree harder. Small side note, I mentioned how this spell card goes into its final phase automatically when timed down. This actually applies to a lot of these damage-based phase spells that don't have a rage phase. A notable example of a spell card that doesn't do this though is Koishi's final spell, Subterranean Rose. You can time the entire spell card down while only dealing with phase 1, though it has a long timer, so I don't know why you'd want to do that. But, well, sometimes we do things simply because we can, not because we should. Next is Hijiri Byakuren's final spell, Legendary Flying Saucers. Wait, Byakuren has 2 rage phases? Guess she's got a lot of pent-up anger. Anyways, this one is weird. Byakuren will change out her blue talismans for red ones. The rings are denser and faster. The final damage phase ends up at red talismans too, but not before Byakuren is a few seconds from going down, so you don't do much of it. Is it harder than the final damage phase, or barely different? If you've done it before, feel free to let me know, since as far as I can tell, there's virtually no difference. Still, it's considered a rage phase, so it's on here. Next up is Hojo Nue's final spell, Grudge Bow. This one has laser shootout and split into bullets. The speed and density increases per phase. The rage phase cranks this up to 11. There's barely any grace period between the bullets, just constant action. It's a fun one to watch. No idea if that's true for doing it though. That said, I guess some people found it wasn't fun enough for them, so by using TH Prac, they increased the frame rate of the game to make it harder. Seems that 72 FPS is considered the threshold between skill-based dodging and luck-based dodging. Grudge Bow isn't the only spell people uncap the frame rate for a challenge, but it's the main one I think of when I hear 72 FPS capture. 72 FPS Grudge Bow capture is an incredible feat, but I guess it wasn't enough for Valle Van Van, as he went ahead and captured the spell at 78 FPS. A ridiculous capture to say the least. And not even the end, as he went ahead and captured 81 FPS while I was writing this script. Who knows what I'll do between this writing and the actual upload? Check the pinned comment to find out. Next up is Kirisame Marisa's final spell, Fairy Destruction Ray. It's very rare I get a chance to talk about Great Fairy Wars, so let's make the most of it. Since Marisa isn't taking Cirno seriously, she's using flashlights in place of her normal lasers. Being in the light drains Cirno's motivation, which is this game's life system. In other words, Marisa shines a light into Cirno's eyes until she gives up and goes home. Okay, back to the pattern. As you're seeing, there's moons. I think. Blocking the light. The frozen bullets block as well. The pattern gets faster and denser, with the final phase changing the bullet type to fireballs, meaning they can't be frozen without using a bomb. If you don't know anything about Great Fairy Wars, just pretend you know what all of this means. The rage phase starts at about 20 seconds, and it becomes a denser version of the regular final phase. Given how this fight works, you can be in the flashlight and not actually die. But, well, I have no idea if anyone has done this completely damageless. I'm not even sure anyone has done this one in any form to begin with, though anyone who could would certainly earn the title of the strongest. Next is Saiyoji Yuyuko's Endless Evening Cherry Blossoms. Yuyuko shoots out butterflies that turn into rice, which are aimed at your general direction. This spell increases in speed over time, and it gets kinda ridiculous. Especially when you remember that this is a Stage 1 boss. Though if any Stage 1 boss was going to hide some whack-ass pattern, the one who originally debuted as a Stage 6 boss would be the one. I guess Yiko wanted to remind the player just who they were messing with their timeout shenanigans. Next is Kaku Seiga's Tongling Yoshika. Yoshika lumbers towards you, firing lasers and orbs, while Seiga hangs in the back throwing knives. Seiga increases the speed she throws knives over time, but when Yoshika is shot down, the speed will reset. The speed does cap, but it still gets pretty bad, on top of Yoshika being right up in your business. Pretty likely to shoot down Yoshika at some point intentionally or not if you're attempting to finish the spell normally though, so you'd only really get into this absolute state of stabbing if you're actively refusing to tongle that Yoshika. Next up is Futatsuiwa Mamizo's final spell, Full Moon Pompokolin. Big glowy crisscrossing bullets that leave behind frogs that shoot at your position. The rage phase starts with 25 seconds left, and it only increases Mamizo's rate of fire. Kind of a similar feeling to Suiko's final spell with how mild the pattern is compared to other finals, rage phase and all, and how little I have to say about it. Honestly, this one feels less like a rage phase and more like a slightly annoyed phase. Next up is Shinmyomaru Sukuna's second non-spell. Shimmy gets in her bowl and bullets pour out. As you damage her, the bowl breaks, and it starts the next part of the pattern. The bullets that pour out speed up quickly, and it doesn't take much time for it to cap out. But again, you won't see much of it when you're doing the non-normally. Timing it down without breaking her bowl results in quite the spillage, but you can't fight the non in only this state, so it's more a spectacle than anything. Still a neat standout considering it's not even a proper spell card. Next up is Shinmyomaru Sukuna's Wall of Isun. The intended way to do this one is to activate the glowy orbs and slip through the openings they leave. However, the walls can be squeezed through, and it's a damn good thing they can, because those last 20 seconds or so speed up to a point where you'd never be able to survive this spell unless you could. The max speed of this pattern is considered a rage phase by TH Prac, but it doesn't really fit into what makes a rage phase. But who really cares what you call it? It's impressive to survive it all the same. Next up is Horikawa Raiko's Alternate Sticking. Whenever Raiko hits the wall, she spawns bullets, and the amount of smaller yellow ones increases up to a certain point. The pattern gets pretty nutty near the end, but you won't see very much of it due to the timer, so I'm showing you it with the time lock again. This one is more of a demonstration, as I thought it was neat. There's no real way to take the pattern on starting at its max output, so if you want to try this one, you would have to survive for close to a minute. Next up is Hikatia and Junko's final spell, First and Last Nameless Danmaku. This spell card has the two of them shoot waves at you, and damaging them increases the rate of fire of their pattern, though Hikatia does start shooting double kunai. Only one of them has to go down to finish the spell, so you'll only have to advance the phases for one of them. The rage phase here is similar to Wall of Isun, in that it's considered a rage phase by TH Prac, but not by the established rule. At 35 seconds, both Hikatia and Junko start advancing their phases, and by 29 seconds, both hit their final phase. Having to deal with both final phases at once makes this considerably more difficult, obviously, and this is what makes it feel like a rage phase. Though given Junko is pure fury, wouldn't everything she shoots at you already be considered a rage phase? Next up is Kurokomasaki's final spell, Deeds of Devilish Beasts. The pattern starts with simple purple bullets, and each phase adds an additional layer of new bullets to it. Not much to say there, but Saki is neat in that her final still progresses when timing it out as if you were damaging it. At 30 seconds, the pattern hits the final phase, and at 20, it reaches the rage phase, which adds a layer of fast purple arrowheads. Again, not much to say here, though it is a proper rage phase this time. Next up is Himemushi Momoyo's Shield Method of the Yokai. Momoyo has a set of lasers that keep you moving, and the yellow bullets pulsate to create the main stuff to dodge. The rage phase increases the frequency of the pulsating, meaning an increased amount of bullets. It's more of a novelty rage phase than anything. But don't worry, Momo Yo's got a bit more to share. Next up is Himemushi Momo Yo's Dragon Eater. So I was told this pattern had an issue that made it virtually impossible to survive, but wasn't told exactly what it was. Well, the pattern looks straightforward, a claw of red and purple bullets aimed at you, and they shoot at a couple of bullets behind them when they hit the bottom of the screen. The amount increases as the pattern goes on. So check out what happens around the 20-second mark. To be honest, I don't understand what's happening here, but from what I can tell visually, the bullet clutter that's supposed to be dispersing isn't actually doing so. Yet it's still shooting as if it was. It's certainly neat to look at, but I don't think anyone is ever going to beat this. Oh, and not a rage phase. Last up is Himemushi Momo Yo's final spell, Mushihime-sama's resplendent and restless daily life. Well, I'm not sure how to explain this one. She fires these orange arrowheads that kinda cross on you. The additional phases add more of the same bullet type, and as the density increases, the speed decreases. The rage phase starts at the 20-second mark, and it's essentially just a sped up version of the final phase, though I'm unsure if the density of the pattern increases as well. And that's everything. All the current Windows era rage phases in Touhou, as well as some patterns that I thought were interesting, some being just as, if not more, ridiculous than actual rage phases. Prior to this video, I was only really aware of Nue's Grudge Bow and Yukari's Border of Life and Death, so it was cool to see how many more of these there were. I also greatly enjoyed all the extra patterns, particularly Mirasa's Sinking Vortex, mostly for seeing how stupid it gets when things aren't hard capped. I'm unsure if there are any other patterns that have something like this to show off, but at least as far as a speed cap is concerned, Minarasa had me covered. If there were any other patterns that I didn't cover that you think would fit well into this kind of video, feel free to let me know. And while we're at it, let me know what your favorite pattern you saw here was, or even if you've ever completed one of them before. If this video somehow inspired you to take a crack at some of these yourself, then I wish you the best of luck. And try not to rage over them as much, as the bosses are raging over you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.